Hey guys, how's the Speaking Out Loud challenge going? If you watched the previous video and are committed to speaking Spanish out loud every day between now and the holidays, imagine how much more confident you'll be by then. You speak Spanish every day. The words and phrases are beginning to flow out of you more confidently than ever. Your thoughts are beginning to occur in Spanish, not just in English, and you can start to say that you are a Spanish speaker. And how much better will the holidays be this year with your Spanish-speaking friends and relatives if you can feel even 10% more confident speaking Spanish out loud when you feel like saying something? But today, we have to take a reality check. Although you can be a lot better in Spanish very quickly, you won't be perfect anytime soon. And no matter how much you improve in the short term, you're always going to run into problems, usually in the form of awkward mistakes or misunderstandings. In the previous two videos this week, we talked about the first two rules for preparing to speak Spanish by the holidays. Rule number 1 was to learn one new word or phrase in Spanish every day based on what's personally important for you to talk about. Rule number 2 is to speak Spanish out loud every day, especially practicing complex grammar and making it all flow smoothly. Today, we'll go over rule number 3, which is embrace the awkward. What does this mean? In a nutshell, you're going to make a lot of mistakes as you start speaking Spanish more and more. And those mistakes are going to make you uncomfortable. If you let that discomfort discourage you from persisting, you might not have the confidence that you need by the end of the year. So what we'll go over in this video are some strategies for actually getting motivated by discomfort, embracing the awkward mistakes, and actually using them to make you more confident instead of less confident. It all comes down to adopting a growth mindset. A growth mindset is a mental shift that you can do internally to convince yourself that mistakes are not always bad. If you can feel awkward and be okay with it, you can help prevent yourself from getting too overwhelmed, embarrassed, or frustrated to move forward the way that you need to. The fact is, extensive research shows that we can hack our beliefs about ourselves to become better at language learning. This field of work has been pioneered by Carol Dweck, a psychologist who's done countless studies over the last 3 decades. Basically, the success of students, young and old, has been measured against whether they adopt a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And the findings are very clear. So let's start by going over what are the differences between these two mindsets. You have a growth mindset if you attribute success to effort. If you see someone doing well at something, your automatic assumption is they worked exceptionally hard at that. Growth mindset learners respond well to failure and discomfort. When you make an awkward mistake, you take this as a hint that you should continue to practice in order to get better. You have a fixed mindset if you attribute success to innate talent. If you see someone doing well at something, your automatic assumption is they were born with a gift for that. Fixed mindset learners respond negatively to failure and discomfort. When you make a mistake, you take this as a hint that you should not continue to practice the skill. Here's what Carol Dweck's research has found. Growth mindset learners are not delusional, happy-go-lucky characters who believe that they can achieve anything if they put their mind to it. Not exactly. But they do tend to be exceptionally good at sticking to their goals, no matter how many awkward setbacks they run into. Language learners with a growth mindset are much more likely to become fluent in a language than people who think that they were born with an innate talent or gift for language learning. This belief in language learning talent is often actually really bad for your ability to embrace the awkwardness of language learning and grow step by step. Students with a deeply embedded growth mindset know that if they work hard and if they don't give up on the belief that they can grow and improve, pushing through the embarrassments, they're the ones who will end up making it all the way to true bilingual fluency. But going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset doesn't happen automatically or overnight. So how do you change your mindset about language learning, and how do you make your new mindset a tangible part of your life? It all starts with embracing the awkward. Here are 3 tips for turning awkwardness into a strength. The first tip is, you're not bad at learning Spanish. Words can be very psychologically powerful things. One of Carol Dweck's studies demonstrates that just a few words can significantly alter the learning choices that a student makes. A group of 5th grade students were given puzzles to solve. Some of the students were told, "You're really smart," when they solved a puzzle. Others were told, "You worked hard." Afterwards, the students were told to pick another puzzle to solve, either a similar one or a more difficult one. They were told that if they chose the harder one, the extra effort of the added difficulty would help them learn. As it turns out, a majority of the students who were told, "You're really smart," picked the easier puzzle, and 90% of the students who were told, "You worked hard," picked the more difficult puzzle. As you can see, a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset can be triggered by something as simple as a 3-word phrase, "You worked hard," versus "You're really smart." Later in the video, we'll dive a little more into the importance of this emphasis on difficulty. For now, suffice it to say that difficulty is actually what we want. We want to have the confidence to do tough things like joining Spanish conversations with our Spanish-speaking loved ones without being discouraged every time it happens. Ultimately, the first tip for adopting a growth mindset is to change your language. So here are some of the phrases that someone with a fixed mindset will use. I'm good at this type of thing. I'm bad at languages. I'm a natural. I'd never be able to do that. Here are some of the phrases you'll hear from someone with a growth mindset. I worked hard at this. I need to put more effort into my verb conjugation work. I overcame a lot to get to this point. I haven't mastered that yet. So notice that all of the fixed mindset phrases seem to relate to innate talent, whereas growth mindset phrases reference hard work. The most important takeaway here is to stop using the phrases good at or bad at. If you want to identify with a growth mindset, those phrases need to exit your vocabulary. Replace them with phrases that reference how much effort went into something. This means acknowledging that your ability to learn Spanish is not a matter of fate. It comes down to your own effort, your own disciplined pursuit of excellence in language learning. It means challenging yourself to do difficult things, fail at them, feel awkward, and learn from your mistakes. It means making it a personal goal to highlight the areas where you need to grow and working very proactively on those areas. The second tip for embracing the awkward and adopting a growth mindset is to highlight your mistakes. The thing is, trying not to make mistakes is one of the biggest crutches that language learning students need to leave behind. Making mistakes is essential to growth. But naturally, most language students are understandably shy about speaking incorrectly. I've actually noticed that this is a real problem for a lot of our students who have completed the Spanish in 1 Month challenge or the free accelerated Spanish materials, and now they're starting intermediate Spanish. It's understandable. Since the accelerated Spanish materials start students off speaking with perfect grammar and phrasing, our students often take pride in their pristinely formed sentences when they're using a vocabulary of fewer than 400 words. However, in order to explore the language from there, it's important to be bold about making errors. Leaving the nest of comfort can be painful, but the best growth happens at the edges of the comfort zone, not deep inside it. Of course, it's easy to take pride in not making mistakes, but this can be a real problem for learning. In the book The Art of Learning by chess master Josh Waitzkin, he tells the story of a so-called chess prodigy whose parents bragged that this kid had not lost a chess game in over a year. This child had been recognized as the best player in his school, and the praise went to his head in an unhealthy way. So in order to preserve his no-loss record, this kid, of course, insisted on only playing chess against people he knew he could beat, like his classmates and his family members, and he refused to play against anyone he could lose to. We learn the most when we confront our weaknesses head-on. Waitzkin calls this investing in loss, putting yourself in situations where you know you'll make mistakes. When you're caught making a mistake, it means that you've identified an area where you can grow. A growth mindset recognizes weaknesses as opportunities. If you've been conditioned to have a fixed mindset, as most of us have, you probably don't like it when someone tells you that you've made a mistake. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, it feels like an insult. Instead of taking it as, here's an area where you can grow, we instinctively interpret corrections as, here's what's wrong with you as a person. Of course, that's not what a coach means by pointing out a mistake. The fact is, corrections to our Spanish are awkward. But if we adopt a growth mindset, we can do the difficult and humble task of learning from those corrections. Every time your coach tells you that you've committed an error, you can thank the coach and then repeat it back in the corrected way. You're then much less likely to make the mistake again. In this way, you're turning your mistakes into opportunities to grow, which is the right way to learn. Better still, the holy grail of growth is to set yourself up to maximize the number of times that you'll make mistakes for immediate correction, even if making those mistakes is going to be embarrassing or painful. This goes against the grain of our conditioning, and that's especially true for adult learners. As The Art of Learning points out, we're usually punished or embarrassed for making mistakes in our professional lives, so we avoid situations in which we're likely to make mistakes, just like that unfortunate kid who refused to play chess with anybody that he might lose to. But the best learners are the ones who invest in loss. This means not only making mistakes, but being open to criticism of those mistakes and going so far as to prioritize working with people who will be openly critical of your performance. This is probably why an enormous number of English speakers who have married into Spanish-speaking families come to us for help. It turns out that a spouse is not the best Spanish teacher. When you're with your family, you hopefully foster a safe, comforting environment. Since criticism is often taken as an awkward and disagreeable way to interact with someone, it's often avoided among people who are building trust with one another. That's why hiring a native-speaking personal coach who isn't a family member is the best way to learn a language. It's important that you not only make mistakes, but you have your mistakes corrected as soon as you make them. A coach who knows you will help simulate what you want to do with your relatives, but in a lower stress environment. This helps build the experience of speaking face-to-face with someone in Spanish and of making mistakes, but without as much pressure. A Spanish coach sort of meets you halfway, giving you just enough challenge to build your confidence a little bit at a time so that you're in a much better place when the holidays roll around this year. You'll still have some fear around approaching conversations with your relatives, but a lot less because you'll have had so many experiences, including awkward mistakes, with your coach, so that it's not a huge leap from there to talking with your relatives. So if you do participate in Spanish coaching, always make it a point to push yourself every day to the point that you're always making mistakes that you can learn from. If your coach is a professional, they'll gently correct any mistake and you'll grow significantly from every meeting. The third tip for embracing the awkward and adopting a growth mindset is to enjoy the difficulties. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own Spanish fluency story. For most of my life, I've never liked the old cliché, it's all about the journey, not the destination. As a type A, goal-oriented person, I want to set ambitious goals and meet them. I want the thrill of crossing the finish line, of declaring, I did it! However, that led to some serious problems when I first started learning Spanish. I got to the point that I stopped enjoying studying Spanish because it meant I had to admit that I hadn't crossed the finish line yet. I wish I had known this at the time, but according to the best research on learning any knowledge or skill, there are no finish lines in learning. In fact, the students who do the best tend not to be obsessed with the finish line. For learning Spanish, this means that, ironically, the students who think the most about crossing some tipping point into fluency are less likely to become fluent sooner. Instead, it is all about the journey. In A Mind for Numbers by Barbara Oakley, she describes process-oriented versus product-oriented thinking. Product-oriented thinking has to do with finish lines and fixed mindsets. Students with a fixed mindset tend to be obsessed with the idea of being a fluent Spanish speaker. But that's something they can't just flip a switch and become. Being fluent in Spanish is a product. On the other hand, students with a growth mindset tend to focus on being a good Spanish learner. And being a good Spanish learner is something that you have control over. Being a good Spanish learner is not an end product, but a process. And that process largely comes down to doing difficult things, messing up, and learning from your mistakes. If you take the focus off of the product, being a fluent Spanish speaker, and onto the process, which is doing the consistent daily work that'll get you there, you can focus on the task at hand. And then you're more likely to see difficulties not as insults to your intelligence, but rather as tools that are helping you head in the right direction. In fact, the difficulties themselves might be your best friends. If you ever find that your path to fluency feels easy, you might be on the wrong path. Learning should often be difficult, and if you have a growth mindset, you can look for ways to enjoy those difficulties. Just like you welcome criticism and thank the coach who critiques you, you should be grateful for the difficulties that come with language learning, because those difficulties are what are going to carry you toward fluency. Enjoy every corrected mistake, every halting conversation, every awkward discovery of how little you know. When you stumble upon a new world of grammar that you never knew existed, but now you're going to have to master, celebrate it. You have that much more work to do, and it'll be fun. Nowadays, one of my mental hacks for fostering my growth mindset is to remind myself that every time I find a huge gap in my understanding of Spanish, instead of being embarrassed, I should be relieved. Rather than complaining, look at all this knowledge that I didn't know, I celebrate it. Look at this huge area where I can improve. A growth mindset thrives on finding problem areas and turning them into opportunities. The bigger the problem area, the bigger the opportunity. Fortunately, the journey isn't just going to be difficult. There's a lot of satisfaction to be found along the way, and hopefully you see a lot of really joyful personal wins this holiday season. But it all starts with choosing to be a good Spanish learner and to take joy in the journey, not in the finish line. Don't fixate on the end result, I want to be fluent, but instead celebrate all the little milestones along the way. For example, I just used a subjunctive without thinking about it for the first time. And even more importantly, find joy in the daily work that it takes to get to those little milestones. For example, it felt good to push through today's Spanish listening routine even though I didn't feel like it at first. In other words, don't fool yourself into thinking that the joy of Spanish is out there on the horizon somewhere in the future when you're finally fluent. The best learners are the ones who find joy in the daily work of getting slowly better and better at learning Spanish. Ultimately, having a growth mindset means having the confident humility to admit that you speak Spanish as well as you do because of the amount of effort that you've put into it. That means that if you're speaking well now, it's because of how hard you worked. If you're not doing so well, you'll acknowledge that you need to work harder. Let's summarize this video. To achieve a growth mindset, first, change your language. Never use the phrases good at or bad at again. Instead, frame language learning in terms of effort. Second, invest in loss. If you highlight your mistakes, that doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're growing. Third, enjoy the journey. Focus on the process rather than the product, and try to find fulfillment even in the difficult tasks and awkward moments. Now let's step back a little bit. It's been a long week, but in summary, here are the 3 rules that we've been talking about in our 3 videos for going from intermediate Spanish towards speaking confidently with your loved ones by the end of the year. Rule number 1 is to learn 1 new word or phrase in Spanish every day based on what's important for you to talk about. Rule number 2 is to speak Spanish out loud every day, especially practicing complex grammar and making it all flow smoothly. Rule number 3 is to embrace the awkward and adopt a growth mindset, getting motivation from your mistakes. Please comment on this video with the tip that you found the most surprising this week, or use the comments to ask me questions, and I'll do my best to respond to as many comments as I can. Meanwhile, remember that if you want handheld guidance in following these methods for becoming fluent in Spanish, my team would love to be there for you. We have coaching options at a variety of levels based on your budget, and all of them include personal work with a coach who will get to know you and support you personally at every step in your journey. Our coaching is at your own pace, so if you can put in some consistent work on your Spanish at any level every week, whether it's 5 hours a day or just 30 minutes now and then, our coaching is guaranteed to be the best Spanish service you've ever used. Thanks for taking this journey with me this week. Leave a comment on this video and I'd love to help you along your path to Spanish fluency in any way I can.